Combat is looking really exciting in Ashes of Creation. Make sure to watch to the end.
Hey, what up, boys? So,
Hello!
we'll kind of blitz through the intro today because I really want to discuss the combat and updates to the MAGE archetype that we saw during our latest live stream.
Yes, please.
If you missed it, then, what the f*** are you doing it? Go watch the 4K video up here in the top corner because it was absolutely mind-blowing.
Make sure not to miss it, folks. There's definitely some good stuff in there, I'm guessing.
And I'm so excited to discuss the feedback for a class that I'm literally never going to touch. But
excuse me? Okay, so I am quite certain that I'll be playing Ashes of Creation, and I always love the mage archetypes, so I will definitely be playing it. So I'll let you know if it's good or not when I play it.
Before we get into that, our patrons and I would love for you to grab yourself a Yola, because Intrepid are really starting to show some promise with the tweaks that they've made to their class design, and today I have a huge amount of feedback, suggestions, and a little bit of obsessive autism to weave some interesting changes to what we saw, and I hope you enjoy what I have in store for you today. Now, with all that bollocks out of the way, let's begin, shall we? So, first of all, as I explained in the last video, the combat direction you guys are going with the game is absolutely fantastic. You've really refined the direction that everyone has been asking for, so please, 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 don't listen to these action combat Andes. This is exactly the perfect blend of action and tab targeting that you've been working towards the whole development cycle. I've explained it time and time again where the combat originates from, and I can promise you, anyone complaining about it has never actually played the hybrid combat from Guild Wars 2. Whoa, getting off to a ranty start, apologies for that. Let's swiftly move on to the mage because I have a lot I want to discuss today.
Okay, so I can't tell if this is old gameplay or not, but so far what I'm seeing, it looks pretty cool. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say that it's more flashy or exciting or like more graphically complex than say like BDO so far, but you know, it's still early stages. Maybe it'll get there. We'll see.
We'll just be discussing the feedback on the abilities in this video because I think the augment potential, the never-before-seen technology that they showed us, and the general vibe of the game right now are all topics that are literally 15 minutes worth of thin air discussion. So they will indeed be getting their own videos later in the month. Now, we'll start with the first ability, Blink, because it's, well, it's not that interesting, is it? Animation looks okay, but overall...
I actually like that animation. It's really clean and like... it's the perfect amount of flashy, but not too distracting. Like, it definitely gives you the vibe that you're doing like a dimension door or a quick teleport. And I don't know, it's got the right color scheme that makes me think that. Like, it's a very like void, like dimension-y travel type look to it. Yeah, it looks good.
Well, not really much to say, is there? It's just a blink, guys. The rest of the spells, however, are super cool, and Shell is a great one to break the ice with. The effect looks awesome, and I really enjoy the slight camera motion that you have going on upon activation. I think you guys experimenting with camera movement like...
this actually looks really good. It kind of reminds me of Diablo. I believe there's a shield or a shell ability kind of like this in Diablo, and... this actually looks kind of better, in my opinion. I mean, it looks really nice. It's clean. You can tell that it's kind of like a shield, like it's a dome around you, right? And it's kind of like got this cool shimmer to it. And I don't know, I like it.
This is a major step towards giving your attack animations some real impact. Kind of like what we see from BDO's marketing class trailers, but in a much more practical way. The camera shake and POV adjustments are a very good start, and I'll explain a little more in the video with chain lightning, as I think you guys should experiment with it more.
Okay, so he's talking about how the actual like camera and things interact when you use your abilities to kind of give more of a sense of action or like flow to these abilities. And that is cool. I noticed a little bit of that when he was activating the shield. Like you could see it kind of like zoomed in a little bit to kind of give effect to the fact that the shield was coming into existence or whatever. Yeah, it is pretty cool.
definitely going in the right direction. As for some feedback for Shell itself, well, obviously it's unfinished, and I'm sure it's already in the works, but a particle dissipation effect wouldn't go amiss when the spell ends, and if you really want to go the extra mile, maybe try to make the particles, as they fade away, float off with the wind, or with the flow of battle reacting to weapon swings dynamically.
That would be
Just
cool.
That extra level of polish available to Unreal Engine sets Ashes of Creation apart from most of our currently popular MMOs. Speaking of Unreal Engine 5 and its potentials, Ball Lightning is one of the spells that I really want to focus on today.
This is so cool to me. It kind of, like, the way he's casting it, it kind of makes me think of Dragon Ball Z. Kind of makes me think of, like, Spirit Bomb, but also kind of mixed with Kamehameha Wave. And that is just awesome to me. So this is one of my favorites already. Very easy favorite. Yeah, I love it.
Today, because all of your spells looked amazing, except...
Oh, by the way, that was really weird. The spell, it is actually staying relative to the level of the plane that you are on once you cast it, if that makes sense. So he cast it at the level where he was standing, and it followed down the stairs and onto the continued platforms at the level that he would have been standing still at those points. It's really weird.
For this one, the functionality and mechanics of Ball Lightning are great. However, in my opinion, Ball Lightning is one of your spells that are still suffering from the same problems that we've seen in previous showcases, where the spells and weapon swings, they just don't fit in your beautiful Nanite and Lumen world. As I can understand that. Something about the aesthetic of Ball Lightning is kind of like, well, this is like such a beautiful, glowy, like picturesque world, and then this almost looks a little bit cartoony, because like I said, it reminded me of DBZ, and I mean that. It is almost cartoony the way it looks, so yeah, maybe he's right. Thinking about it, looking at the spells frame by frame because I don't have a life, I think the problem is the insanely high contrast you guys have applied to the range and brightness of the light that emanates from the center of your abilities. It's way too intense and harsh. If we look at how Lumen actually interacts with the world in an isolated showcase from some random UE5 presentation, you'll notice that the light bounces around and fills the space in a very realistic way. That's what makes Lumen and Unreal Engine 5 so impressive. It seems like your spells, they don't utilize Lumen in a realistic way at all. It's still using very binary, old lighting techniques that have been available to gaming since, well, forever. Your whites, they're far too white around the center of your spells, and the surface of your world makes it look extremely out of place.
I actually 100% agree now that he's pointing this out. Like, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's too, like, static. There should be more spread to the light, or it should be more dynamic. It shouldn't look like it's just coming from a single point and spreading out. It should be like, okay, where is it interacting? It should be more dynamic. Like, is it bouncing off of the enemies that are right in front of them, or, you know, rocks or terrain or whatever in the background? It should be filling spaces in a way that makes sense, like, to our, you know, to the real world. I completely agree. Yeah, it could definitely be more, I don't know, it could definitely make it feel more alive.
Someone posted an extremely well-made visual representation of how Ball Lightning can be improved from a visual point of view, showing how it currently is in a very binary ball of light kind of way to a much smaller, chaotic lightning energy that kind of utilizes the same dynamic spell technology that you've applied to Chain Lightning.
I actually like that. Yeah, that could be pretty cool. I like the suggestion there. It definitely seems like a way that could improve on it, while still keeping the idea of Ball Lightning.
Really great suggestion, and I took it slightly further by applying this into what it would look like in-game with that Lumen light spreading much further than it currently does. I hope you continue to work on these issues with further effect representations.
That'd be sick.
Loosen up this light, bring it out, and let Lumen do its work. Obviously, I have no actual experience with any of this, and I'm just one nerd whose whole life revolves around a game that quite literally doesn't exist. exist. But again, your spell effects, your melee weapon swings, they all have a very serious problem fundamentally, and I think it has something to do with the contrast and the brightness of the light that you apply to them that is old lighting techniques that our devs were taught years ago, and it's being forced into this new nanite and lumen based world. With that said, all the rest of your spells were amazing, so let's move on. Blizzard was a...
Yeah, those are all great points. I completely agree.
Really, really impressive spell, guys. Great job with this one. You really knocked it out of the park. The animation...
That looks sick. That actually looks sick. So clean. I love the animation on the falling, like, spears of ice. And then the way they spread and the like chilled fog off of them when they land. Oh, so cool.
The mechanics, the actual projectiles, the small little storm effect, and the frost impact on the ground is pretty much...
perfection.
I have absolutely zero feedback for this one. It's just extremely well made. However, it did spark an interesting thought for me when I was watching how the impact effect works on the floor, and people were suggesting that they would love to see a clear circle of where the damage area actually is. And
I can appreciate that. Yeah, I can appreciate that. When you're casting a spell, you want to know where it's actually going to land, who it's actually going to be able to hit as you're casting it. So that makes sense.
Not a fan of this kind of effect representation. I think it's extremely immersion breaking, brain dead, and quote unquote game like.
Yeah, I totally agree, Narc. Yeah, that's silly. You shouldn't have a circle that just totally defines where it's at. That doesn't make any sense at all. Who wants to break the immersion? That totally makes sense.
Into that modern mentality where min-maxing is a thing everyone should be doing, and it's designed to be easily accessible for everyone, therefore everyone expects min-maxing. In my opinion, I think the learning curve of understanding where your spell effects start and end based on your actual real-life experience using it, and the dynamic nature of not always being perfectly centered, is a much more immersive, skill-based, and rewarding way to play.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Like, you could totally learn your spells to the point where you know, like, even if it wasn't the same exact radius or circumference or whatever each time, and there was some variation to it, you would learn where that variation was if you used your spell often enough, if you knew it well enough. So you would know, like, okay, if I stand this close, even if this is the smallest point where this spell normally lands at this spot, I know that if I'm this close, it will hit no matter what. And so you just know those kind of allowances, and you're really good with your spell. It's skill-based, like he's saying.
Separates the boys from the men, and what you showed doesn't need a clear circle to indicate where the actual...
By the way, what is this 360p video? Come on. What is going on, Narc?
Damage is. We, as players, as mage mains, playing and learning it over time is part of the fun of progression.
I actually have to check. Let me just check. Yes, it is in 1080p, but the recording is showing as like 360 or 480. This is crazy.
Am I just out of touch, or what? No, it's the kids who are wrong. Next, we have Cone of Cold, and I want to take this opportunity to actually apologize to you guys for saying that these spells are inspired from World of Warcraft. And
Cone of Cold, so that display just there was very underwhelming. When I think of Cone of Cold, it immediately triggers like D&D concepts for me, and when I play D&D and I cast like a cone ability, I imagine it as a cone, like it's just this big, it's like a tornado coming out of your hands or your whatever, your wand or your staff, but coming out horizontally, right in front of you. So you're blasting out this cone, this swirling vortex of ice right in front of you. And what I just saw was super underwhelming. It was like a couple spikes of ice and then a little bit of like misty ice fog around it. I really hope they improve on that one, because that was definitely underwhelming.
I'm sure they are on some minute level, but you are completely right. These are not World of Warcraft spells, they're Dungeons and Dragons ones, and I'm embarrassed for even suggesting it.
That's what I'm talking about.
I had wow brain at the time, because I think mages are complete pussies. As for Cone of Cold's feedback, well, it's good, but it just needs some polish, and I'm sure Intrepid are aware of that, but I will say...
underwhelming. Extremely underwhelming. Kind of sad. Being a D&D player and knowing how I imagine, and I think a lot of people imagine those kind of cone spells being cast in their head when they play D&D. Definitely underwhelming and sad. A little pathetic. Like, I know I'm being harsh, but this game is still in the early stages. You have a lot of room to improve, and please do so.
I do really enjoy the suggestion of the ice shards that fall upon the ground and blow away in the wind. So allow me to comment on that instead. You see...
You know, okay, so now that I saw it again, I guess maybe it was the grass kind of interrupting it a little bit. It is kind of cool the way that the cone, well, not really a cone, the triangle shape of, you know, ice and cold is kind of billowing out from the center point. That is cool. But I really just wish it was a little bigger, or like, I don't know, more grandiose or something, because right now it still is kind of pathetic looking.
Little shards of ice, they don't blow away in the wind, do they? It's frozen water. It's a great concept. However, shards of ice, they would melt instead. I feel like leaving a little damp spot on the ground underneath them would be far more immersive and make sense.
Yeah.
I think the blowing away
that makes
tech
sense.
you've obviously spent a lot of time on would look amazing for dirt and ash that is spawned from earth and fire spells. So maybe consider the actual physical properties of the elements that are spawned from your spells going forward. I'm almost 100% confident that this is a global thing with the technology that you've designed here that applies to all spells and is further applied through your augment system. So it's important.
I agree with him there. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely little touches that could be made like that where, oh, an ice spell and little shards of ice are left behind. Oh, it melts and leaves just a little wet spot, just a little puddle or something, and then it dries up quickly or whatever. You know, like it doesn't have to be a global thing, or what do I mean, like a persistent thing or something that lasts for a long time. It could just be like a couple seconds as part of the animation, but just those little touches just bring that little bit of extra realism that's more immersive and more fun.
To make sure the actual effects of these elements are immersive if you're going to go that extra mile.
Right.
Ash and dirt would blow away, ice shards would melt, lightning would linger and fade into the ground or objects around it, and I'm sure there's other elements in the works that we've yet to see, like the nature, holy light, and darkness as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how these applied through upcoming archetype reveals. Now, I'll skip Lightning Strike, Arcane Volley, and Frostbolt because they're all just very basic single-target spells. Arcane Volley looks absolutely fantastic. Maybe
it looks
a little
great.
Too glaring, but overall, I'm fine with it. Lightning Strike just seems to need a little more polish with the actual casting.
Yeah. The casting animation was kind of sad. It was just little wisps of just like it was. I don't know how to describe it better than that. Like, it was just kind of sad. Just a little like, okay, what are you doing? But then when the actual bolt came down, it looked really cool. So, you know, it's kind of sad, but then it has a nice finish or something like that. I don't know.
Animation, and the same can be said for Frostbolt, which leads us nicely into what is probably the most visually stunning ability out of all of them, and I genuinely have no feedback at all for this ability, guys. You knocked it out of the park again with Chain Lightning. The visual, the animation, the impact, and the actual tech that you've designed here where it conforms to the terrain is phenomenal.
That actually looks sick. I do like the Chain Lightning. I love the hovering, like he's feeling himself on that power. He's like channeling it up, and then he just lashes out with it. That's so cool.
Animation work in particular is super impressive, and similar to what I said before with the camera work on Shell, you're 100% going in the right direction, playing around with the FOV of the camera during animations to emphasize that impact. You almost make the animation look slow-mo towards the end of the cast. Keep working on this, and don't be afraid to experiment. Go crazy with it a bit. Try some...
Like, any way that you can make the spells or animations or any part of it feel more impactful, so that the experience just feels that much more fun. Like, oh yes, I love casting this ability. It feels so good to cast it. Like that, all that stuff is good.
unorthodox, wild-looking techniques, because that's what makes BDO's combat so impressive during their marketing trailers. It's got nothing to do with action combat. The combat mechanics themselves, this not even part of it. It's 100% to do with the presentation. Next,
they do really good presentation.
Slumber, probably the most controversial spell out of them all from both a visual standpoint and mechanics one. Although talking about mechanics and balance at this stage is kind of pointless as it's a work in progress, I do want to mention the visual representation of spells like this. It's so very important to make animations of soft crowd control abilities and the actual debuffs that come with them recognizable immediately. Then we as players can react to them in real time instead of doing that thing where we're
Yeah. You shouldn't have to guess and be like, okay, did I put them asleep? I can't really tell like what happened there. If you're in a party or if you're in a raid with like, you know, I don't know, 24 people or 40 people or whatever, like a big world boss that 40 people can attack or something like that, and you can't tell if it actually fell asleep or not because it's not clear enough, the animation isn't, I don't know, it's just not immediately recognizable like he's saying, then it's not a good animation, it's not a good ability. You gotta fix that.
Staring at the UI for 90% of MMORPG combat. Even I don't like doing that, and I am a massive advocate for tab targeting. And right now, the animation for both that slumber spell and the debuffs, they're non-existent. So I think returning to these aspects is important if we're going to move forward with the gameplay, instead of taking steps backwards. Hybrid combat is about taking the best of both worlds and applying them, and Ashes of Creation is all about innovation and improvement. Right? Finally, we have what I'm assuming is the mage's actual class mechanic. Elemental class mechanic. Elemental empowerment. The mechanics of it are fantastic and 100% fulfills that mage fantasy in a way that actually tells us as players the importance of weapon attacks in Ashes of Creation. I'm confident we simply don't understand the huge emphasis that actual weapon attacks have in this game's combat. And I think it's causing a bit of disconnect for us to understand the actual direction of the game's moment-to-moment gameplay. That said, as the mage demonstrates with elemental empowerment, weapon attacks are super important to weave in between cooldowns to stack those debuffs. And this goes without saying, but we can't forget that we still have a whole layer of progression and customization when it comes to the weapon skill trees. Now, I'm sure
this is sounding interesting. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Weapon empowerment, something like that. So I guess depending on what class you have, your weapon takes on some of those traits maybe or something. That's what I'm gleaning, but I'm not really sure if that's true.
Are very aware, but there is no actual animation or player feedback to both the UI and the player character when this ability is activated. You see, when elemental empowerment is used, the weapon you have equipped should be engulfed in whatever element is currently active. For example, the great sword should be engulfed in lightning, frost, fire, or earth when the ability is used, and swaps dynamically as elements are changed. I'm sure this is on your list of things to do because the spell is missing an animation altogether. But whilst we're on this note, let's briefly talk about a previous video where I explained how these core archetype mechanics shouldn't be a simple button on your UI or a buff under your nameplate. They should have their own UI element themselves, and I want to have an interesting one for today's video. As you can see, it is an elemental focus that can conform to the customization available to our user interface and dynamically change.
Yeah, it would be really nice to have a little UI element so you know, like, okay, this is what empowerment that I'm taking on right now. And some sort of, you know, I don't know, wispy, maybe even related to the element change on, like, an animation around the body or around the weapon that was clearly visible, just so you could have, just for a second, you're like, I switched to fire. Oh, yes, nice, I'm on ice now. Yeah.
Just elements to show the players what element was last used for elemental empowerment to consume. It's so very important for both the gameplay and impact of the combat that these core mechanics be placed on the UI. And Arcade, the game that I think you're mainly inspired from, really failed to deliver in this aspect. So
learn from them. Learn from Arcade. Don't make their mistakes.
Conclusion, it goes without saying, but the Mage showcase was fantastic, and when we see the
Definitely.
Rogue, Bard, and Summoner, I really hope you guys do look towards that emphasis on class mechanics and how to represent them to the players in a way that is immersive and easy to understand. After all, guys, what we've seen today, is the worst state Ashes of Creation is ever going to be in. It's only going up from here. But as usual, I am just one nerd. Very good MMO, and considering this.
Oh man, I love Narc's videos. He's so good. Such an entertaining guy. But he made a lot of really great points. Like, mostly just animation changes. You know, none of the abilities are like bad. I like them. It's just like the representations maybe need to be changed. Like Cone of Ice. It's a sick ability, but it brings to mind D&D sessions to me and my imagination of a Cone of Ice, which is much more three-dimensional and like much more movement, much more intensity, and the way that it kind of unfurled in like a cold fog with a couple icicles, it was just kind of underwhelming, kind of sad. Same with the lightning ability, not the chain lightning, but calling down the lightning bolt. There was like 3 wisps of lightning coming off of the wand or whatever it was, and it just looked kind of strange. Like, this is weird. This is not calling to mind the fact that you're summoning a lightning bolt. The lightning bolt itself, once it came down on the enemy, looked really cool. But yeah, so really just some subtle changes. I know, and like he said, this is the best time for the game because it's still in development. It's not like they're in their, you know, open beta like 2 weeks or maybe a month before release or something like that. No, they're still very much in alpha, very much so making changes actively, developing the game, making it better every day. And I really hope they just take to heart and mind all of these changes that are being suggested, because it really does, I think, have the potential to be an incredible game. Like, absolutely incredible. I'm super hyped. I hope you are too. Man, Ashes of Creation. There we go. Well, what'd you guys think? Is the Mage class looking exciting? Let me know in the comments. Leave a like, a subscribe, and I'll see you next time.